I never thought I'd be the kind of man whose life reads like a cautionary adult fairy tale. But here I am, George, 32, impeccably dressed, mildly charming, and utterly entangled in the life of a millionaire wife who treats her husbands like, well, trophies, but trophies with a schedule. My life with Olivia, my wife, had always been unconventional. Most people thought she was impossible, and I was, I guess, the willing participant in her whirlwind. But nothing could have prepared me for the afternoon, she said, over a glass of perfectly chilled Chardonnay. Jor, I have a favor to ask. I'd been lounging on our velvet sofa, scrolling through emails about something banal and corporate. A favor? I asked, bracing myself. Olivia rarely asked for favors. She commanded. I need you to help Claire. She smirked, twirling a lock of her hair. Her family's pressuring her, and she could use a supportive husband. I blinked. Supportive husband? You want me to what? Pretend to be married to your best friend? Not pretend, just loaned. She leaned back, eyes sparkling. Think of it as an adventure. I laughed nervously. Adventure, she says, before I end up in witness protection. Olivia's smirk widened, and I should have known then that smirk was dangerous. George, don't be melodramatic. It'll be fun. You're very persuasive. Claire needs persuasion. And that was how I found myself, a week later, at Claire's family estate, dressed in a tuxedo that suddenly felt like armor against inevitability. Claire greeted me with an awkward, hopeful smile, like she'd been handed the most absurd wish and was terrified it would come true. The first few hours were surprisingly normal. We laughed at awkward jokes, sipped wine, and tried to convince her parents that our engagement was perfectly genuine. Then, at exactly the wrong moment, they disappeared. And that's when the world tipped sideways. I woke up the next morning with a headache that suggested I had wrestled an army of elephants in my sleep. Claire was beside me, looking equally bewildered. George, what? SHH, I hissed. Let's not think about it yet. Maybe it's just a dream. Her wide eyes told me otherwise. The evidence was painfully, undeniably real. I tried to pack my bag quietly, my mind racing for escape routes. I imagined sprinting across lawns, scaling fences, disappearing into the horizon like some tragic romantic hero. But then Olivia appeared. I froze. She leaned against the doorway, sipping her espresso, looking impossibly calm, and said, Packing already? I was hopping for a head start, but I see you like to take initiative. I didn't expect. My words stumbled. Olivia raised a perfectly shaped brow. Did you think I'd be angry? She stepped inside, circling me like a lioness inspecting her prize. I'm not angry, not really. In fact, she smirked, I think we're playing a new game, and George, I intend to win. Claire coughed nervously. I looked between them, realizing my life had just become a chessboard with two queens who didn't even need my consent. Game, I managed weakly. What kind of game? Reproduction, Olivia said deadpan. I wanted to die, disappear, crawl under a rock, anything. Instead, I sighed, sank into a chair, and muttered, Well, at least it's not boring. Claire laughed nervously. Olivia smiled like she'd just won a medal, and somewhere in the back of my mind, I realized the absurdity of it all. My life was officially unsalvageable, but also strangely compelling. Because if there's one thing I knew about Olivia, it's that when she set her mind to something, there was no surviving in the usual sense. You either played, or you became a footnote in her story. And I was very much in the middle of it. I had always considered myself adaptable. I prided myself on staying calm under pressure, thinking that charm and a smile could smooth over almost anything. But nothing, not my years of social graces, not my careful posture, not even my love for perfectly folded handkerchiefs, had prepared me for the schedule. Olivia, in all her meticulous glory, had decided that this bizarre arrangement required structure. George, she announced the next morning, clipboard in hand, I've drafted a calendar. It's efficient, it's fair, and it ensures that no one, Claire, you, or I misses a crucial moment. Claire's eyes widened like she'd just been handed the world's cruelest joke. I, on the other hand, stared at the clipboard as if it contained ancient runes that could summon disaster. "Schedule?" I asked weakly. "You mean like a timetable?" "Yes," Olivia said cheerfully, as if she were describing a new flavor of ice cream. "Tuesday mornings with Claire, Thursday evenings with me, weekends alternating. And naturally, prep time, recovery time, emotional check-ins," she trailed off, looking at me expectantly. I wanted to run, but I couldn't. Not yet. Not with her watching me like a hawk, her smirk cutting through my resolve like a blade. Claire cleared her throat. "So this is permanent." "Temporary, darling," Olivia said lightly. "Temporary and immensely productive." And there it was, productivity. I had spent a decade of my life believing that was the highest goal. Now, productivity involved me being a literal cog in a reproductive machine. By midweek, I had started keeping a small notebook, not for appointments, but for survival tactics. Tip 1, never make eye contact with Olivia first thing in the morning. Mistakes here are catastrophic. Tip 2, when Claire laughs nervously, smile and nod. Do not speak. Survival depends on ambiguity. Tip 3, always carry chocolate. Bribes are better when edible. Somehow, in the midst of chaos, life became poetic. Claire had a quiet warmth I hadn't expected, a softness in her laughter that made me pause in the middle of scheduling horror. Olivia, for all her calculated dominance, had moments of vulnerability too, like the night she told me about a childhood fear of being invisible, of being ignored even when surrounded by opulence. I started to see them not as two competing forces, but as two complex people who, against all odds, had roped me into the middle of their lives. And maybe, just maybe, I was starting to care in ways I wasn't supposed to. One evening, Claire leaned against the kitchen counter, her voice soft, almost conspiratorial. "Do you ever think this is insane?" I nodded slowly. Every day, but it's strangely alive, like we're all characters in some surreal play and no one wrote me a proper exit. She laughed, a quiet, melodic sound that made my chest tighten. I wish I could hit pause. I wanted to tell her that sometimes, when life is unbearable, the pause button doesn't exist. But instead, I just smiled. And as Olivia's voice floated down the hallway, "George, make sure you're rested for tomorrow," I realized that survival wasn't the goal anymore. The goal was understanding how to exist in this bizarre new world without losing myself completely. Which, frankly, seemed impossible. But the sun was setting, casting golden light across the living room, and in that moment, everything, madness, schedules, absurdity, felt almost beautiful. Almost. By now, I had accepted that my life no longer belonged entirely to me. It was split, parceled out between two women, both brilliant, both impossible, and both oddly captivating. The schedule dictated my hours, but it couldn't contain the emotions that were slowly sneaking in, uninvited. That evening, Claire had invited me to take a walk through the estate's gardens. The air was cool, scented with jasmine and the faint metallic tang of approaching rain. We walked in silence at first, the kind of comfortable silence that comes when two people know they shouldn't care this much, but do anyway. "You ever think about consequences?" Claire asked, her voice hesitant. I stopped and looked at her. The moonlight caught her hair, turning it silver. "Every day. I think about them while I brush my teeth, while I schedule my naps, probably even in my dreams. But honestly, I don't know what consequences really mean anymore." She laughed softly, leaning against a marble fountain. "You sound like Olivia sometimes." "Which part?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "The part where you're supposed to act calm, but inside, you're dying." I smiled, and for a moment it felt like the world had slowed. "Yeah, that part." Then, almost imperceptibly, our hands brushed. I pulled back quickly, feeling the absurdity of the situation weigh on me. I was caught in a storm, standing between two women, and yet here I was, noticing small sparks in the night. "I should," Claire murmured, stepping back. "You shouldn't what?" I asked, though the words sounded hollow even as I said them. "Care," she whispered. And that was it. The line between duty and desire blurred into something messy, something intoxicating. I wanted to tell her it was okay. That life was chaotic, unfair, sometimes beautiful in its madness. But I stayed silent because words could break the fragile balance we'd managed to keep. By the time we returned inside, Olivia was waiting in the living room, casually draped across the sofa with a glass of wine. She smirked as I walked in. "Well," she said, tilting her head, "did you survive your little counseling session?" I hesitated. It was fine, peaceful even. Olivia's laugh was soft, almost musical. "Peaceful?" She shook her head. "George, you underestimate the chaos you inspire." Claire shot me a glance, one filled with equal parts worry and amusement, and I realized we were all trapped in the same story, each of us playing roles we hadn't auditioned for. And yet, despite the absurdity, despite the schedules, despite the chaos, I felt a strange sense of belonging. Later that night, as I lay in bed, I reflected on the bizarre trajectory of my life. I had been a trophy husband once, admired for my looks and manners, but I had never been tested. Not really, not like this. And somewhere deep down, I understood that this testing, this challenge was changing me. I was learning to navigate impossible choices, to survive emotional minefields, and reluctantly to feel. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, a reminder of the schedule for tomorrow. I picked it up, staring at the notifications, reminders, appointments, and subtle warnings. I sighed. Survival wasn't enough anymore. I needed strategy, wit, and maybe a little courage. Because if I didn't figure out how to navigate this, the chaos would swallow me whole. But maybe, just maybe, I could find a way to dance in it instead. By now, the schedule had become a cruelly elegant machine, slicing my life into neat, unyielding blocks. And yet, as Olivia had warned, chaos doesn't respect schedules. It started subtly, almost imperceptibly. Olivia would enter rooms with just a hint of sparkle in her eye, a tilt of her chin that said, "I know what you were thinking," even when I hadn't. Claire, for her part, was quieter, her presence warm but filled with a nervous energy that made every shared glance feel loaded. One morning, Olivia leaned casually against the kitchen doorway as I poured coffee. "George," she said, voice smooth as silk, "I've been thinking. Perhaps you need more intensive training." I froze mid-pour. "Training?" "Yes," she said, stepping closer, her perfume curling around me like a warning. "You see, Claire is expecting. Soon she'll need support, and I'm not willing to be outdone." My eyebrows rose. Outdone. Olivia's smirk widened. "Precisely. If you're going to survive this schedule, you must perform at your best. I intend to excel." I blinked. Excel at what? She leaned in, lowering her voice. "At me, George. I intend to get pregnant, and I want every moment of your attention, your dedication." I choked on my coffee. "Oh, that's ambitious." "Ambitious is my middle name," she said lightly, swirling her own cup. "Yours is compliance, but don't worry, I'll coach you." Later that day, Claire caught me in the hallway. Her expression was a mix of exasperation and humor. "You know she's serious, right?" I sighed. I'm beginning to think serious doesn't even cover it. She laughed, brushing a stray hair behind her ear. "She wants to win, George. She always wants to win, and now it's a race." I pinched the bridge of my nose. A race I didn't sign up for. Claire reached out, touching my arm lightly. "Maybe it's not a race you can win or lose. Maybe it's just a dance." I stared at her, realizing she was right. Somehow, despite the absurdity, the schedules, the competition, there was rhythm in this chaos. And if I didn't learn to move with it, I'd be crushed. Evenings became the hardest. Olivia's presence was magnetic, all sharp elegance and subtle humor, while Claire's warmth tugged at my heart in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was caught between two worlds, one dazzling, one comforting, and both demanded my full attention. One night, Olivia cornered me in the library, a glass of wine in hand, her expression playful but dangerous. "George," she said softly, "you do realize what's coming next, don't you?" I swallowed. "Yes, I think I have a rough idea." She smiled. "Good, because I intend to make it unforgettable." And just like that, I realized. The real challenge wasn't surviving the schedule. It was navigating desire, loyalty, and chaos, all while keeping my sanity. I sank into the velvet armchair, taking a deep breath. Life as a trophy husband had been unconventional, but life as a trophy husband in a love triangle, that was something else entirely. And somewhere, buried beneath the panic and absurdity, I found myself smiling. Because maybe, just maybe, this impossible story was going to teach me something about love, life, and who I really was. The schedule had reached its peak absurdity. Every day was a careful negotiation between two women who were impossibly brilliant, terrifyingly determined, and, in their own ways, fiercely protective of me. I had become a master of time management, emotional agility, and selective nodding. And then came the day that changed everything. Olivia had declared a final challenge. She strolled into the living room like a general surveying the battlefield, a glass of red wine in hand, and that dangerous smirk that could make rational thought vanish. "George," she said, voice melodic, commanding, "today I intend to win." Claire appeared from the kitchen, her hands clasped in front of her, eyes calm but intense. "George," she said softly, "whatever happens, I just want you to be honest, with yourself, with us." I closed my eyes, taking a deep breath. "I'm trying," I admitted. "I've never been in a situation like this." Olivia laughed, the sound sharp but playful. "Good, that's the point. You're never supposed to know what's coming next." And that was the truth. But as the day unfolded, filled with subtle competitions, laughter, and moments that somehow felt intimate despite the chaos, I realized something surprising. I wasn't trapped. I was learning. Learning to navigate impossible situations, to understand two brilliant women, and most importantly, to understand myself. Later that night, I found myself alone on the terrace, looking at the city lights. Claire joined me, leaning lightly against the railing. "You're managing remarkably well," she said. "Better than I expected." I chuckled. "I survive. That's the highest compliment in this house." She smiled softly, and emotionally. I paused. The truth was complicated. I cared for them both in ways I hadn't anticipated. It was messy, impossible, and sometimes painful, but it was real. Olivia joined us, her presence calm but undeniably commanding. "George," she said, "I think we're learning something, all of us." I looked at her, then at Claire. "What's that?" "That life doesn't always make sense," Olivia said. "But chaos has a rhythm, you just have to find it." Claire laughed lightly, and maybe danced to it. I smiled, feeling the absurdity and beauty of it all. I had survived schedules, competition, and impossible expectations. I had discovered subtle romance, laughter in the dark, and an unexpected resilience. Maybe I wasn't a trophy husband anymore. Maybe I was something better, someone who could navigate the chaos of life, with love, humor, and honesty, even when the rules made no sense. And as the three of us stood there under the city lights, I realized survival wasn't enough. Living, laughing, loving, messy, complicated, impossible living was the real victory. "All right," I said, smiling at them both. "Tomorrow we dance again." Olivia smirked. Claire laughed. And just like that, I understood that no matter how chaotic life got, sometimes the only way to survive was to embrace the dance. And maybe, in the process, I discover something remarkable about myself, and about love in all its chaotic glory.